Good morning and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today I'm going to be taking a look at Actual Effing Monsters, an RPG put out by Post-Mortem Studios. There's a reason why I edited the title, certainly during the first 40 seconds of the video, but I may slip in the title a little bit later on, but you can tell it's pretty obvious. So anyway, I first became aware of this RPG when it was announced that the companion was being released, and so I took a look at the companion, and I decided to purchase it, and I purchased it as a PDF, and then realized that oh wait, there's a core book for this. So I went to Amazon and picked up the core book as well. Both this game and its companion is not available on Drive-Through RPG for obvious reasons because of the title. Although the content is not, all that extreme, at least in my point of view, but the title alone is enough to, keep it out of Drive-Through. But very accessible on Amazon, and actually not that expensive either. So I'm going to take a look at this game now and go into some of the concept of the game and why it was so appealing to me. So here's the booklet, fairly small, and we will dig right into it. So the first thing is the design philosophy, all right, which is basically we're so used to seeing in role-playing games that monsters are simply just the bad guys that adventurers go out to kill or superheroes go out to defeat, and so forth. It's always from that point of view, or very often from that point of view, that players are engaging in the worlds that their game masters are, putting them into. The philosophy of this is that no, you're going to play the monsters, but unlike if you're familiar with some massively multiplayer role-playing games out there, unlike the monster play or the villain play that you might have experienced in games like City of Heroes, City of Villains, where the villains, do nothing but combat other villains. So it's kind of a, it's you're not quite evil enough, to use Austin Powers' line. Same thing with Lord of the Rings Online, where once you finally get to level 10 and you go, oh, now I get to play as the monsters. You're basically fighting either other players in a PvP realm, or you're killing other creatures and monsters and things like that. There's very little true evil intent going on. This game differs in that you're playing an actual effing monster, which means that, from your creation to your concept to your needs to, feed that or satiate your, evil desires is, pure effing evil. I mean, you're not a decent being. You are living up to the title of the game. So that's the first concept that really grabbed me, was that all right, we're playing from a different perspective here, a fairly unique perspective, I believe. There are disclaimers, and the disclaimer is this disclaimer should be for everything, not just this product. But this is a game, this is fantasy, it is not reality. This is not an endorsement or encouragement to do anything horrible. That's RPGs across the board. Everything should have this disclaimer. You're playing a game. All right, it's pure escapism, and so that's the the next thing that I was glad to see, in the booklet. So, what is a monster? So it goes through the different types of monster types, the way that the character becomes a monster. So there are monsters that are born, and then just some of the common traits or common backstories of a born monster. Then you have monsters who were made, and so these are the monsters that are made through infections or twists or changed in some way from before they were a monster to now that they are a monster. And then the Neverborn, which are a rare handful of monsters that have made themselves through rituals or magical ointments or broken science, alchemy, accident, or chance. As we move through, all right, how are you monstrous? So how is your character going to represent being monstrous? So all monsters have a mask. They're not just strolling down the street, hey, I'm a monster here. They have an alternate or a way of masking, so an alternate identity or a masking of their true identity. And of course, maintaining that mask is something that's important. There's the power of transgression. In other words, how do they represent through their actions their monstrousness? All right, so and there's a number of things. They could be addicted to things. They can be an arsonist. They could be cruel to destroy other other beings, enjoyment or love or something along that lines. They could be cannibalistic. They could be murderers. They could be rabble rousers. They could be torturers. They could be vandalizers. Whatever it is, their action that they must take in order to satiate their needs, their stamina, their power, as a monster. So they have like very simple motivations, but they kind of compound and build up everything that goes into the being of your character. So your characters, when they choose their different abilities or skills, and they choose their weaknesses, which are called banes, and they choose some of their traits, everything is supposed to be cohesive, kind of make sense. And we now get to character creation. So you're going to obviously choose your name and the name of your monster. You're going to choose the nature of your monster. There's the trio, so there's the mind, body, and spirit, and each start with a d6. And I'll get into the system a little bit later on. There's the mask, which defaults to a d4 and starts with the 3 skills, each starting at d6. So their general score for mask, for hiding their identity, is a d4. And then they do have starting skills within there. Their monstrous powers, which they'll choose 3, and a slippage for each. In other words, what happens if they are only partially successful or fail. The Bane is is linked to their nature. So if you have a fire monster, then your Bane would be either water or cold or something that's the exact opposite. Or it could be a variety of things, as long as it kind of makes sense. They have boosts, initiative, experience, and such. So we get into the naming, which I won't spend too much time on. We get here now to nature. So the nature of the beast. So here are some more examples. So nature starts with a value of a d6, and your monster could be a scavenger, a seducer, a predator, a torturer, a stalker. Their mind, body, and spirit. All right, well, their mind, body, and spirit determine, mind determines your intelligence, perception, general knowledge. Your body determines your strength, your toughness, your dexterity, and agility. Your spirit reflects your force of personality, your aesthetic, your sense, your charisma, and so on. And so each of these, when the character is trying to do something, it'll be tied to, based on what they're attempting to do, will be tied to one of these three categories. And then you would roll for success or failure. So masking and skills, it goes into a section there, and so on. There are many lists of powers. So we get to, page 15 in the book, and we start listing the powers, and there are quite a few. So you really have a great deal of flexibility in how you're creating your monster, the concept of it, and then linking everything together in one cohesive package so that your monster has a chance to survive at least for the short term. And I'm going to get into that as well. Banes and boosts, so they go into the variety of disadvantages and then advantages that you can get when you are successful. There is satiation. So satiation is what drives a monster. I'm over here now. Satiation is what drives a monster to do terrible things and allows them to do supernatural things. Every monster has a drive and an act that feeds their satiation, something transgressive and shocking. So again, you're not fighting other bad guys to be a bad guy here. All right, you really are meant to be preying upon the innocent, the weak, you're playing an evil character. More sections on so your monster history, and so you would answer these questions at least for yourself. So if we're looking at a born monster, who were your parents, who raised you, who was in your family, some other things. How did you come to be on your own? Are you reconciled to what you are? And so on. And so there are a series of 10 questions for each type of monster that your character might be. So now we're going to go and start looking at how things are done. So let me show you the character sheet. That way you might get a better sense of how the system kind of works. So you can see the D4, the D6, the D8, the D10, and the D12. And so some of your like body abilities, let's say your trio, your mind, your body, and your spirit, default at a D6. All right. You can increase those or decrease those. When you increase them, you have to decrease the other two by, one full die. So if I want to make my body an 8, I have to decrease my other two trios to a 4 from a 6, and so on. So you can't decrease something, by more than one full die below, unless you're starting someplace up over here, then you have the room. You can't go below a D4. And same thing with your skills. As you're developing your skills, a harder task might shift you down the scale of the die that you're rolling, and easier task might actually shift you upwards. So I'm going to get back to kind of where we left off. And so how to do things. You can also eliminate the dice rolls by just going with the averages. So what is the average of a D4, a D6, a D8, a D10, and a D12? I personally like rolling dice, and to me that's just the hands-on experience to role playing. but some people prefer to do just totally theater of the mind, and that's fine as well. So it goes through what order in the combat sequence you go through, and that's very much the same as just about any other system out there. There's weapons and there's armors, there's tasers and drugs, there's examples of combat. That's one thing this book has, quite a bit of. There's quite a few examples of play, which I think is a very good thing to have in there. And so that's something that I thought was almost unique with this game, is that it does have several playthroughs. So that's a big thumbs up on that. So running the game, and it gives you notes on how to run the game. And there are 5 pillars in running a game. The first is to push the envelope. In other words, remember what the purpose of this game is, and that is for the player characters to be truly monstrous. Pillar number 2, there are consequences to their monstrous, activities. As the monster gains more notoriety, the consequences for its actions is going to bring an escalating level of response. And the game really conceptually has it where, yes, you're a monster. Yes, you're doing these things, these terrible things. Yes, you are growing in power, but ultimately you're going to lose. Eventually, the humans out there are going to bring so much to taking you down that you will eventually fail. But it's that journey that this game is really about. The journey of, starting out your character and starting to develop that whole sense of being, knowing that eventually you will get taken down, but how much do you live that monstrous being's lifetime? Like how much do you adhere to the character concept is really what the gameplay, I think, is about. So that's pillar 2. There will be consequences. Pillar 3, there is no redemption. So there is no, you are a monster, you will always be a monster, and they probably don't even have the inkling, or at least shouldn't have the idea of trying to redeem themselves. That's not, the mindset that they're supposed to have. They're supposed to have, well, I'm going to, be a predator for as long as I possibly can. Everyone is awful, no exceptions, is pillar number 4. And so they're kind of in a world where there is a lot of gloom and despair and grimness, to steal Grim Jim's name. You're not in a great place, or at least where these monsters are functioning is not in a great place. And that's part of the concept of keeping your notoriety low. As if and this goes back, in real life, decades and decades. When you rob from other criminals, it's not like anyone's going to run to the police, to inform on you. You're someone who kills a really bad person, is oftentimes even given heroic status, in the media. And so these monsters, if they are functioning out there in the real world, they're not going to be going into children's hospitals and slaughter everything, although that would be incredibly monstrous. It's certainly going to bring, the world down upon them. They're evil, they're not stupid and evil, and so that's the one thing that they are going to, probably focus on the seedier parts of the setting. Pillar number 5, everyone dies, which I already explained. That monsters should have the idea in their heads that that their time is very limited, in this world, and things will come down on them eventually that they can no longer handle. And so once again, it's the journey. It's not the outcome that they're trying to change. There's some tips again on running ongoing or short games. So long campaigns or one shots basically. And again, like I said, there's a lot of tips that are in here. There's a short bestiary, and so just some typical monsters. Although this one's kind of atypical, the meth bear, which are kind of interesting. But it goes into the humans that your monsters can encounter, from burglars to tweakers to gangbangers to mob torpedoes. I've never heard that expression before. To law enforcement, and then the different levels of law enforcement to guard dogs, hunters. Now, hunters are basically monster hunters that they're talking about, and so on. And then some additional content and just ideas. There's the lore and the mystery section, but pretty much you're gonna place these monsters, pretty much into your own concept, your own world, and basically run through with that there. And then once again, just the character sheet, which is actually it's nicely placed in the book, so it's easy to make a copy of this as well. So I kind of like the way it's set up. I've seen some others where it doesn't do kind of the same thing. It's kind of buried, and you have to bend up the book a lot just to get the cover out. So let me jump to my other screen, and I am going to show you the companion very, very briefly. So here's the companion, and you can see, I mean, the artwork is like really over the top. It's really cool stuff. And let me just get to the table of contents. So there's a random character generation. So this might actually be pretty fun to do if you're doing a one shot and you're bringing players to the table very quickly. And all right, let's see what we end up with just random rolls. But all these other rules in the companion hasn't changed. You still have origin, you still have transgressions, and so on. We'll go through. I just like that the way that the art style of the presentation of the books is pretty cool. So here you have your nature, cruel, horror show, nightmare. So some of these have changed. Predator, relentless, scavenger, seducer, snake tongue. You have the way with words. All right, so basically just like a smooth, a very sinister, smooth talker, a stalker. So so there are some additions to the core rule book. Working class, middle class examples. So new money. So this must be civilians. Oh no, class and wealth. So old money examples, and the masks. What the masks would look like if you were an old money mask, if your mask was new money, middle class, working class, and such. So a little bit more depth and detail with the companion that you can see. There's a long list of monster powers, so you can see 100 different monster powers. There are a number of banes, rolling a D100. There are some that are in ranges here, so there's probably not quite 100 banes, but you do still have a significant number of them. Boosts, experience expenditures, so what you can expend your experience on. So gain a new skill appropriate to your mask at D4. You can raise a skill from D4 to D6 with 2 boosts. You can raise your skill from D6 to D8 with 3 boosts. So basically, as you gain experience, you're gaining these boosts, and each pip or number of boosts that you have, you can use to expend on increasing the die level of things. And obviously, the higher you're at, the harder it is, or the more boost it takes to increase that skill. A whole section on the new monstrous powers, and I'll stop if I see anything that really catches my eye. Expanded hunter groups, the Inquisition, the Vatican office. Oh, well, this is all part of the Inquisition. So they have a Vatican office, a European office, an Asian office, and so on. So there's different groups that would be aligned against your character. The generals is another. So these are hunters. So these are monster hunters. Stargate. I haven't delved too much into this. Creating a Stargate operative. And so on. Let's see. It's a quite extensive. It's a quite extensive companion. So quite a lot here. Random encounters generation, new monstrous powers, black magicians, humanity. Play as a hunter, so it adds that option to play as a hunter. M cards, random victims, player advice, artifacts, and some of his other things. F This Gay Earth, which was a YouTube feature that Grim Jim had. An example of play. So once again, another example of play, which I found very, very helpful in reading it for the first time. That was included in both. So once again, I hope you enjoyed this preview of it. I like to go through these books for the first time as just a really quick preview, and to just give my first impressions. That's why I call it Unscripted and Unchained. I usually give I will give the good, the bad, and the ugly as far as it's concerned. So, not too much ugly involved in this, and not very much bad either. I mean, I'm pretty happy with this. I see that there's a lot of potential in just broadening your role playing, and taking a different perspective than what is normally seen in role-playing games. So really excited with giving this a try. So once again, thanks for joining the the channel and watching through the video. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Questions and comments are always welcome in the comments section. If you have another game out there that you'd like for me to take a look at, I recently got a request to do that very thing, and so I looked and found the game to, that I was able to pick up for free, and I will eventually down the line, probably a week or so, get around to doing a preview or full review of that game as well. And if there's any Kickstarters out there that you want me to take a look at, if I support a Kickstarter, I'm going to, I'll come in and do a full review of the game that I purchased myself, and share. Please share the videos. That's what's getting out there. My channel is starting to approach that 500 mark, and I don't know what that does for, the exposure of the channel. But it is certainly a benchmark that I was looking forward to hitting, and I'm very, very close. So if you liked it, please share it. And even if you didn't like it, if there's something that you want to critique and it's a constructive but still negative critique, leave your comment there. I don't shy away from someone telling me, hey, listen, you could have done this better, or, correct me on something that, as I'm glossing through the pages, hey, no, that's not exactly the way it works. If you're more familiar with the game that I'm going over, then please feel free to jump in as well. So, once again, thank you, and look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. You all have a good afternoon.